For more on this, we're joined by Steve Keen, a visiting scholar at the University of Amsterdam. Welcome back to the programme, Steve. Now, Europe is facing what some are calling a double shock, which is soaring energy prices and rising debt. Just how serious is this situation for governments across the bloc?
Well, the rising cost of energy is absolutely serious, but I'm afraid I'm going to completely contradict what you've been saying about government debt. And this is mainstream economic thinking. It's not just coming out of journalists who say this. Government debt is not a problem. For example, you just mentioned the level of government debt in France and said it was about 120% of GDP. The level of private debt in France is 220% of GDP. And this is common across the entire bloc. It's private debt which is the danger, not government debt. Governments create their own money, even in the euro situation. So there's no problem about the high level of government debt. It's a record of how much money the government has created, which is a private asset, not a private liability. So this whole fixation on reducing government debt is one of the reasons we're in these problems in the first place.
Now, energy prices have surged by nearly 60% in Europe. How concerning is that for households in particular, as well as businesses across Europe?
Well, this is incredibly concerning because Europe has, by some stupid decisions it's made of its own, such as shutting down nuclear power in Germany some time back, and cutting off its supply of Russian oil and Russian natural gas and getting the Americans instead. It's made energy far more expensive in Europe than it is in either Russia or America. And it's a huge disability, a huge handicap for the European manufacturing sector because energy is an absolutely vital input to everything. So if energy doubles in cost, your profit margins collapse. Now, this has to be the main focus of attention of getting energy prices down in Europe, but it's also a major reason why you have to move to solar energy and nuclear energy to get away from being dependent upon oil, which is clearly absolutely unreliable, not only dangerous for the climate, but unreliable as a supply system for manufacturing processes as well.
There's pressure now on governments to step in with tax cuts and subsidies, but Brussels is warning about the long-term risks of that. What are those in particular?
The long-term risks are a fantasy of the minds of conventional economists, including the ones who dominate the European Central Bank. This is all based on conventional economists not understanding how money is created and regarding government borrowing from the private sector, when if you take a look at the actual accounting, which my entire approach is based around this as accounting, it shows the government does not need to borrow money. In fact, it could stop selling bonds completely and still function. So this is a double mistake. What's happening in energy is absolutely critical and dangerous and real. The worries that economists and government advisors have about the level of government debt is a complete fantasy, and that we should abandon it to have any chance to react to what's happening now with the energy market.
So you've said government debt isn't important, but countries like Italy and France are carrying particular high levels of debt. Why are they under such strain?
Because they've made a mistake of trying to limit the level of government debt while they ignore the level of private debt. And private debt is what caused the 2008 crisis. In response to that, governments had to spend large amounts of money, and that's why the recorded level of government debt began to rise after the global financial crisis. But it was always private debt that is the danger, not government debt. And if you wanted to get rid of government debt, then the European Central Bank could buy all outstanding bonds tomorrow, and there would therefore be no government debt left to pay interest on. You can't do that with private debt. So we've got a false economic theory, mainstream economics, which has misled people to worry about government debt and ignore private. It's the other way around. Private is what matters. Government is a record of fiat money creation.
And what's the way out of private debt?
Thank you for asking. It'd be the idea of what I call a modern debt jubilee. Use the government's capacity to create money, to give people on a per capita basis enough money to pay down all household debt, and not create any money in the process, because the money the government creates will be used to cancel private debt. It would not actually increase the aggregate money supply. So something like that is possible to drastically reduce the level of private debt, get out of the debt trap we've been caught in for the last 40 years fundamentally from the private sector, and then have some chance to do something practical using government money creation capability, again, about the energy shortage.
Steve Keen from the University of Amsterdam, thank you very much for sharing your insights with us.